What would you do if you knew that you had the power to influence people in your lives? Not on big grand scales, but even on the slightest level. We're going to be talking about the power of influence with a great author right after this. What is this life I'm living? How did I get here? Will I ever feel fulfilled? The answer is yes. Your story is far from over. These broken pieces of your past can become the foundation for something extraordinary. I've been there more times than I'd like to admit. On the outside, I appeared strong, confident, and put together. But inside, I was lost, exhausted, and unsure of who I was anymore. So I made a choice. I stepped away from the chaos. I made the hard decision to put myself first. You're not broken, and you're not alone. It's time for your truth, for your healing, for your rediscovery, and for your growth. So are you ready? Welcome back to another episode of the Lorraine Lindsay podcast. I am all about mindset and the conversations of mindset. Here, I believe that if you can change your mind, you have the power to change your life. And more specifically today, this is a conversation I've actually been wanting to have for a very long time. The conversation about influence. We hear about influencers and things like that all the time, but what does it really entail to be of influence, to have the power to influence people that can change their lives, improve their lives, inspire their lives? And today in studio, I'm so privileged to speak with an entrepreneur, an author who talks about influence, not because he wrote a book, but because he's lived his life through that message. So before I introduce this powerful guest, let me give you a little information about our next guest here. My guest is Mr. John Haremza. He is an entrepreneur, speaker, author, and mentor with over 37 years of experience in network marketing industry. He has generated more than $1 billion in team sales and over $30 million in personal commissions, making him one of the most respected leaders in the space. But what makes his story so powerful is where he started. John began as a maintenance worker in a potato chip factory, and through one expected opportunity, completely changed the trajectory of his life. Today, he is known for helping everyday people step into leadership, build confidence, and develop one of the most important skills for success, and that is influence. His latest book, The Power of Influence, dives into how to communicate effectively, lead with impact, and create meaningful results in both business and in life. So without further ado, John, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. I'm so excited to have you. It's been long overdue, so I'm happy. It's better late than never, they say, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited to be here and just real impressed with your whole setup here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with first how I met you. I actually had the privilege and the honor to be inside your beautiful home at one of your book launches.
Mm-hmm.
So you gave this speech. You had your beautiful daughter read some excerpts from your book, which I thought was beautiful and powerful. It's great to see that kind of lovely connection. And then just the amount of people that were there to support you and to be inspired by you. Everybody wanted a copy of your book. I have a copy of your book. Tell us about the beginning, where this idea to write this book, The Power of Influence, came from, and then a little bit about your background.
The book itself was kind of almost like a little bit of an accident. I'm very much into personal development, right? I mean, that itself was a life-changing, experience for me, is getting into the personal development. And I've heard about influence, I've gone through, how to win friends and influence people and all that type of stuff through the personal development. And I was reading a book, or not actually reading because I have dyslexia, but I was listening to an audio, and it was called The Traveler's Gift. And there was a particular story in there talking about influence in the people around you. And I really began to dive into influence itself, because I don't think people realize, we think about influence as having control or having power over someone else, but we also don't look at the other side of influence. We're always being influenced, or we're influencing. And it starts as when we're a child, right? When we can't make the decision. As we age, we can make the decision of if we're going to allow this to influence us. But when we're young and a child, we're being influenced by our environment, by the people around us. And so the story in this book that was so intriguing to me is, it was this guy who traveled back in time and got in a car accident, was going through some very difficult times, kind of like in a coma, and he was visiting all of these, important people from the past. And it was King Solomon. And he was asking him if he had any kids. And this guy's name was David Ponder. And he said, yeah, I have a young girl named Jenny. She's like 14, right? And said, do you ever worry about who she hangs around with? And he says, oh, yeah, absolutely. When she's around with the wrong people, we see it in her attitude. And then King Solomon asked a follow-up question, at what age does that change? Right? And is it 21? Is it 35? And the fact is it never changes. I mean, our environment is constantly influencing us. And so that's one side of it. And then, of course, the other side is the influence that we have on others. And influence is good and bad, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say that. One of the things my mom used to tell me growing up was, if you show me your friends, I'll tell you who you are. And that used to frustrate me when I was younger. But I realized that that's incredibly true, right? And you hear it all the time now. You are, if you don't know who you are, look at who you're in direct proximity to, and that's a good indicator. But I love what you're saying, because sometimes when we hear the word influence, we only think of it in a way that might be positive, and not really understanding that influence, we are constantly being influenced at any age, depending on where we are in our life. There's different things that influence us. So how do we make that power? How do we understand the power behind that?
Well, I think number one, we have to be conscious of it, right? We got to be conscious of our surroundings and the people that we hang around with, and the materials that we're watching. I mean, everything influences you one way or the other, either positively or negatively. And then we also look at the other side of it, that we have that influence on others, whether we think we do or not. And, to our kids, to the coworkers. So it's back and forth. And I think the biggest thing is understanding it's happening, and which side of the equation are you going to be on?
So what was it for you then? I mean, you read that book, but then what was it for you? Was that like the epiphany for you to create some awareness with it? And then what did you do with that knowledge? How did you see the lens of your life differently after you kind of got that epiphany?
Well, because I grew up in a small town, right, in Minnesota, and, I have dyslexia. And back when I grew up, it wasn't really understood. And so I was put in all these small private classes, having tests read to me. And, so I came out of school with literally no self-esteem and no self-confidence, and I went to work in a factory. I was a welder, a maintenance person. And, I got around, because in that, I remember, really early on, overhearing my dad one time. I'm probably like 10 or something, right? And he was telling a friend of his how concerned he was about me because of my struggles in school. And even use the term stupid or whatever. So it was kind of, it's like I carried on with that. And it's because just one statement can influence you through your whole life, right? And because then I went to school, and then I'm putting all these classes. So that was kind of like constantly being reinforced. And then I went to work in this factory, and now I'm around people that were really seeing my value, because I was really good with building things and with my hands and creative in that way. And so that kind of began to, build my influence. Didn't understand it at that time, right? But as I look back on it, I'm just seeing all these things throughout my life that influenced me. And then you make decisions based on those influences, or you create it forms who you are, right? Yeah. Who you think you are.
That's powerful what you say, because awareness is so key, right? And in that example, you gave both a positive and negative on what influence was. And this is why I love this conversation, because it is like, when you say influence is powerful, just the word, right? Words have power, and words influence. So when you hear this stupid, it becomes a belief system that's limiting. But then you can change your lens by changing your environment, by having people who see that you are of value. What was it? Because I know you mentioned, like I read in your bio, that there was a moment for you working, as a welder in this potato chip factory, where there was this unexpected occurrence. And let me ask you this before you get into the occurrence. Would you have been able to take that opportunity if you still had the narrative that you were stupid only and did not see your value? So just showing the demonstration of how even that power of influence can make you move forward with opportunity, or kind of hold you back.
Well, I think the incident you're referring to is when I was working in a factory. And again, I mean, I was so shy and introvert, I literally wouldn't even say hi to somebody. So the whole idea of getting involved in anything that I have to deal with people or talk to people was not something that I would have ever considered, right? Especially sales. And so a friend of mine invited me out to his house, to look at something to do with a water filter. And given my background, I thought he probably wanted me to look at the quality of the product, maybe build a display or whatever. And here it was, this opportunity to market these water filters. And this was 37 years ago. And so for some reason, I saw there was an opportunity with these water filters, not to like build an organization as I have, but I saw a product that people needed. I mean, this is 37 years ago. I mean, bottled water was just coming on the scene. Filtered water was really not even, it was kind of revolutionary. Right. And so I saw that opportunity, and I started out just thinking, gosh, if I could just make a few $100 extra a month, I believe in what this product can do. It changed instantly the taste. And so it was kind of interesting the way these things were sold. It was called a puppy dog approach, right? You just like giving somebody a puppy, you don't want to give it up, right? So we would let people try it for a week and then come back in a week and see if they want to buy it. And so, I bought 4 water filters that night. I wrote a check out for $480, which, he was going to hold the check till Friday when I got my paycheck. And I went out that weekend and placed 3 of the 4 filters. And I came back a week later and I sold 1. And I bought it for $120, sold it for $179. I put $59 in my pocket, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be rich.
Wow.
Right? I mean, that was like the easiest money I ever made in my life. I'm like, this is crazy. And so that's kind of how I started into it. Didn't understand, they were always talking to me about how I should get other people involved. And I'm like, why do I want to create my own competition? But anyway, my brother was my first recruit. And the only reason I brought him in is because we had made a pact between us that no one else was to know about this. It was just going to be him and I. We didn't want anybody else to do it. So that was kind of my entry into that. But it was, what it did is it brought me to, just like when I went from school and believing that narrative and all those special classes, then into the workforce where I was really appreciated and valued as a maintenance person, and then into this part-time gig where I'm around. Now I got introduced to personal development, and I started listening to that information, going to some events where I'm meeting people that are excited about life and not just settling for a job and this is what we do. And so all those, when we look back, all of those influences began to change my whole world.
It's interesting. So what I love, as you say things, there's things that I write down so I don't forget to say it. But like, this is what I heard that really stood out to me was it didn't matter what negative narratives you had. You knew that you knew you had value, but then you saw something of value as well. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to make a ton of money. It was like, this actually looks like a useful product.
Right.
You believed in the product. And that's something, and it's kind of like a sidebar here because I hear a lot of people who get stuck in they're stuck on something, or they don't believe that they're influencing themselves negatively, if you will. And then sometimes just finding something that you believe in so much that it's genuinely going to solve a problem for somebody could be what completely and utterly changes your life. So when you get into this, you've got your 4. Mm-hmm. Where did the like, I guess the gumption to go out and actually go to those first 4 people and say, put this in your house? Like, what gave you the courage to even do that?
Well, it was probably, driven by, I could not afford to lose $480, right? I got really caught up in the emotion of what I saw happen, and I wrote this check out. It was December of 1988. I was engaged to be married that December 17th. I came home living in a trailer house, and I showed my fiance at the time these 4 water filters, and she didn't share my enthusiasm. And so I went out that weekend, and I it was middle of winter. I'm living in Minnesota, and I'm knocking on doors. Didn't know anyone, right? Because the little town I lived in actually the water wasn't chlorinated, so the water was fine. So I went to this neighboring town where I knew the water stunk, right? And, I just would drive around and felt like that looks like a nice house, and I would go knock on the door. I think they felt, sorry for me, to be honest with you. But yeah, and then I went back the next week, and that's when I brought my brother with me, sold 1, and he wanted to do it. And so that was kind of my launch into it.
I'm laughing over here because what you said earlier was you got into this factory work or whatnot because you didn't want to be around people. You were not into sales. But one thing, and I've talked to a lot of very successful people through the years with the careers that I've had, and every one of them that came from nothing to something, they put themselves in a position where they had no choice but to
Right.
thrive. The failure was not an option for them. And so when the why is so compelling, your fears kind of have to fall by the wayside. They're still there, but you just kind of have to mull through them. Otherwise, it's sink or, it's what is sink or float or whatever the expression is.
Yeah, no doubt.
And just creating an environment for yourself where it's like, this has to work is also power of influence.
Yeah, and I think it's it has to work as the financial end, but it's also your pride, because you got excited about it. You said something, and then you didn't want to have to eat crow, right? And so that was part of it. I think when you talk about you mentioned it a little bit ago, because that's the person we listen to the most is ourselves. Right. And so when we're raised in that negative environment, that's the narrative we're constantly feeding back. So this was like completely out of, the realm of my possible thinking. And so it was, quite a life-changing experience. But, it's one other little part of that, because I didn't want to go to this meeting. Right. There was a breakdown at the factory, and I was maintenance supervisor at this time. And so when there's a breakdown, you have to stay. And otherwise the line shut down and people are standing around. So I ended up showing up to this meeting like 2.5 hours late.
Wow.
And it was out in the country. I didn't want to go. And this is also the impact of influence or the commitments you make. I made a commitment to go. I didn't want to go. I could have went home and just sunk into the couch, had a beer and a pizza, and started all over the next day. That little decision to go versus not go was a moment that completely changed my life. That little decision. And then you think of the compounding effect of that decision as I've then learned to share it with other people. I mean, literally tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people got introduced to the concept because of that little decision I made.
Wow. It's crazy how one thing, like you said, can change the entire trajectory of your life. So take us down that journey, because I think a lot of people can be inspired or influenced by this story. 4 doors, or maybe several doors, but you have 4 products.
Actually, you know what? I knocked on every door, took a filter, and then I placed a 3. I never knocked on the 4th, and I was terrified.
Yeah. How do you go from that to a point where you're like, I can get out of the factory work now? What take us on that journey of, because here's what I've seen with people too, is they'll start something, they'll get a little bit of momentum. And then somewhere in the middle of that momentum, whether there's influence that's negatively saying, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Are you crazy? You're going to quit your job? Are you out of your mind?
Mm-hmm.
To that negative self-talk. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? You got a stable job. It's paying you a pension, yada, yada, yada. What was it for you that kept you going?
Well, it was because I started out really slow. I mean, I was just doing it really part-time, and I made that $59 and saw the potential, and so I'd be going out on the weekends just doing this, right? And so you start making a little bit of money, and then you start listening to personal development, you go to some meetings, and you start seeing a bigger picture. Right. And so it just like opened up a world that I didn't know exists. It's kind of like I was a kid in a candy store. I mean, literally every day was like new discovery, that a world that I didn't know existed.
It's keeping yourself curious.
Yeah.
What was it for you that tapped into the personal development side of that?
Well, it was the introduction of, I didn't know what personal development was. I never heard of it, but getting involved in the environment of network marketing, personal development is a big part of it. I remember the first set of tapes I bought was Tony Robbins' 30 Days to Unlimited Power. And I remember listening to the second tape. It was an audio tape. And it started out, it says, congratulations. You've just made it further than 95% of the people.
Wow.
And you think about, there was $178 for that set, which is a lot of money for me. That's like a half a week's work, right? And it was just, literally, I'm listening to this information. That's one of the number one things I tell people. Personal development is the absolute key, right? And it's I tell people personal development is like bathing. You got to continually do it, or your mind's going to get dirty. Because we got all this influence around us. Much of it is negative, so you got to pour the good stuff in.
It's like you have to be intentional about, and I'm so big on personal development over the last probably 15 years of my life. Being a coach, when they say to teach is to learn, has helped me, but also wanting to make sure that I'm sharp and that I stay on top of things because I do have emotional setbacks. I have that negative loop. Everyone has that, right? But just when you're learning and you're developing, you're expanding. It's growth. And you talk about Tony Robbins, he talks about the 6 human needs, and the 2 biggest ones are growth and contribution. So when you're growing and learning and developing yourself, there is a part of that makes you feel like you're unstoppable. But my question for you is this, because I love that you were like personal development, but did you always have that notion? Or was there something or someone that influenced you to really tap into personal development? Where did the inception of it come from?
Well, I mean, I think as a really, really young kid, I think that I was really talkative, and apparently I was, really active. And it was, I think, hearing, first my dad say that, going to kindergarten, struggling throughout high school, I just became invisible and became very reserved. And so this kind of pushed me into an area because I think I might have possessed some of those skills, and then it was all just buried, right? And then it opened a door again, and I began to discover and learn. And it literally, I would listen to the stuff everywhere I went. I mean, it was just invigorating and just like so exciting.
That's I love that you're saying these kind of things, and I think people really need to hear it. I hope it really sinks in, because I can say, even for myself, going through trials and tribulations of life and having setbacks and adversities and things like that, when you expand your mind and you allow yourself to develop, you start to see solutions to problems. You start to see hope where you think things are hopeless. And then possibilities just start coming up from all different things, and you feel like, all right, if I could just push a little bit more, learn a little bit more, then what could be on the other side of this? I saw this video on social media the other day, and I thought it was powerful. It said, and I'm gonna paraphrase it here, but it said something along the lines of, when you need to save money in the moment, you feel broke, but on the other side of that is riches. When you're learning something new, you often feel stupid, but on the other side of that is knowledge. And there's so many different things in our lives where we resist it, and what we're missing is, what is the other side of that? And so I love that, again, personal development, growing, learning, expanding yourself, a human, on the other side of that is riches in many different ways. So what was it for you? Because eventually, ultimately, like you said, 37 years, you had $1 billion in sales, 30 million. This is the potato chip factory gentleman that is now a multimillionaire, and obviously changing other people's lives as well, because you built a team. So how did it go from just you and your brother, we're not telling anybody, to project to having these kind of numbers for your career?
I want to back up one moment to another motivating factor.
Okay.
As I think about it, because none of my friends, my family, my coworkers, they were all, I mean, it almost brought me back to high school, and that feeling of, you can just tell me I can't do it, that I'm crazy, laughing at me and everything else. Right. And so it literally, I almost feel sometimes like I need to go back and thank them all just for pissing me off to push forward in those really times of doubt. Right. Because I just wouldn't allow myself to fail, because I put myself out there. And I think that even comes back to influence. Is part of building influence is doing what you said you're going to do. When you say you're going to do something, you do it, even when you maybe regret having said that you were going to do it, right? So, but yeah, I think it just really, for me, it just happened so slowly. It just, like, every day was a discovery, and then I'm getting recognized, and I'm getting around, powerful people that are treating me like an equal, then versus, this person that has no opportunity or no potential. And so just, like you said, it opened up a door, and just, I learned and grew and learned and grew. And, it just, all of a sudden I became this person that other people are following. And literally, I mean, I remember, buying a lake cabin and sitting out in the dock, and, I'd made decent money, not like I've made now, but decent money, like a life I didn't experience. And I remember sitting on the dock and just almost like, how in the world did this ever happen?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it just happened a day at a time, a brick at a time. And I think the other thing, and it touched on that decision to go to that meeting. Every decision we make in life makes a difference.
Absolutely.
Coming here makes a difference. Every single decision that we make, regardless of how small or insignificant, it, impacts the outcome of where you are today.
And that in and of itself is quite influential because, to your point, I think a lot of us become obsessed with the outcome and not realizing that the outcome, there's a path that leads to the outcome. And like you said, every decision you make is a brick that lays the foundation of that path to get you to the outcome. And if you just focus on laying the brick, now the next one and the next one, it'll get you to where you want as long as you're very intentional about that. And even if it doesn't, I think sometimes too, we obsess about what we think the outcome should be instead of just being in the journey and letting it manifest the way it's supposed to. My question for you, because you seem very tenacious, right? You just have this tenacity about you. Obviously, you're like, oh, they're naysayers. I'll show them. Because I have the same attitude.
Yeah.
I was a young mother. I had a kid in high school. And everybody said, you're not going to graduate. You're going to fail. You're never going to make it. Your kid's going to be a statistic. And that would fuel me. I was so angry that they thought that. And some people were saying it because literally that's what they believed the outcome to be. Some were saying it because they were just being haters. And some were just looking out for me. But it just made me feel like they were setting me up to fail. And I wanted so desperately to prove them wrong. Now, they influenced me in a way that made me want to prove them wrong. And so I leveraged that. But what do you say to the person where they let those words influence them, where they don't move, where they stay there?
Yeah, I think that's where, for me, it was the personal development, coming back to that, just reinforcing that I can do this, to take that negative naysayer, instead of accepting it and crawling, going into a fetal position, you're right. I can't do this, I think it's that information from the outside, staying, involved around the right people gave me the support, if you will, to push through the naysayers, push through the people that said, versus, again, I remember even when because I had supportive people, even my bosses, and they cared about me, and they were trying to, I think, was there to protect me, right? Because they've seen others that have done stuff like this, maybe it didn't work, right? But then there's the other people that like you said, the haters, or maybe it's even jealousy. God, what if he does do it, right? Right? Misery loves company. So, so I think I forgot what point I was trying to make there, but
about the influence of how do you not stay stuck in that influence,
right,
in that negative influence?
Yeah, so I think it's the pride of not proving them wrong and staying around the positive people, pouring in the good stuff to support, what you believe without accepting what they're saying.
I love that. I think that's, I don't think I've ever really heard anybody quite say it that way, where it's like, yes, you're going to have negative people. Yes, there's going to be negative influence for whatever the reason being, fill in the blank. But you have to find the opposing force, right? It's like, okay, well, I have this going on. Let me go and actually be in rooms and around people that see my potential and put my potential to work. People that will motivate me and lift me up, because that's just equally important. Otherwise, if you stay in a cesspool of people that are just negative because maybe they don't have the courage to do it themselves, or like you said, some people are not comfortable with you thriving because if you become better than me, so to speak, are you going to leave me? So there's different motivating factors, but it can weigh you down if you stay in those environments. What were some things that you did as far as personal development? What were things that, like you mentioned the Tony Robbins, and here's another thing, like you're like spending $178 or whatever it was to buy these tapes. That was costing you. That was like, that's expensive. But what was it in you still to say, you know what, this is an investment in myself. I'm still going to do it? Because I've had to make those choices too, where I'm like, I know I only have this much in my toolbox of what I understand about self and where I want to go in my life. And the only way I'm going to get out of that is to invest in something. And it's a leap of faith, because it's not a tangible necessarily. It becomes tangible later. So what was it for you that you were like, I'm going to make the investment anyway? Like, what was that drive for you?
Well, I mean, I think I saw something, and then the people that brought me in were encouraging me to do this and, you know, get involved in that. So it's kind of like I was coachable, right?
Okay.
Okay, you know, if this is what I need to do, this is what I need to do, versus, you know, nah, I don't need to do that, right? But the person from a personal development standpoint that's probably had the biggest influence on me, not probably, definitely, I still use them every day, and that's Jim Rohn. Have you ever heard of Jim Rohn?
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, his wisdom is, I mean, even my kids quote it all the time too, because I mean, it's just rock solid that you can apply in every single part of your life.
I mean, Jim Rohn is the biggest inspiration or influence for Tony Robbins. He quotes him.
He worked for him, or Tony worked for him,
Yeah.
I think at first.
Yeah.
Yeah. But his quotes are on, you know, just like you talk about negativity. And, you know, just when you get something really good going on, it's like somebody wants to rain on your parade, right? And Jim Rohn's quote is, you know, all goodness is intact. You know, not to think your garden's going to be invaded is naive, right? And so when I was in this networking, 4 years with my first company, and the top earner left, and just was a max as exodus. And I literally thought all the wind came out of my sails. I'm just like, oh my God, it's over, right? But then I stopped for a moment and thought, okay, I'm actually doing better than I've ever thought I could do. And I believed in this concept, and I believed, you know, what I can do. And so then I went out and found another vehicle, right? So it's interesting once you begin to adopt those philosophies and really live by them, that, you know, now I believe you could drop me anywhere and I could start over with what I know.
And that's a powerful mindset to have. I think that is incredibly powerful. I think it makes you unstoppable, actually, right? Because I wish I had that in me sometimes. There are times where I'm like unstoppable in my mind, and then there are other times where the negative influence is definitely consuming me. And I go through the peaks and valleys because of that. And sometimes I get frustrated with myself because I have enough awareness that I know what's happening, but emotionally I can't pull myself out of it. So what do you do for yourself to, and again, I know you do the personal development. Well, what are some other things that you do to really help influence yourself to get out of those moments, like you said, when there's this, here you are with this company 4 years and
well, part of the motivation could be I don't want to go back, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to go back because I remember when I left my job, I actually even, because they're laughing at me and telling me it'd never work. And I said, you know, maybe you're right. But the worst thing I figure that can happen is I'll just have to come back and get a job like you've got, right? And so that not wanting to go back to that life when I saw something bigger, you know, motivated me to push through those, because we all have times of doubt. And we all want to quit, and we all have that, you know, those bad times where we're, you know, sulking in that self, you know, pity or whatever. And that's, again, coming back to being conscious. You know what's happening, and you got to get out of it. I remember hearing something once about, you know, Jim Rohn again. He says, you know, what happens to us all. It's all what we do about what happens that makes the difference. You know, two people, identical circumstances, different decision, different outcome, right? So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what happens. It's all in what you do about what happens.
That's so true. I mean, I heard this, I think it was a pastor once said, you have twins and they're the exact age, identical twins, and they grow up with an alcoholic father and they become adults. And one does not drink at all. And they say to that one, why don't you drink? Well, because my father was an alcoholic. And then they say to the other one, who is also an alcoholic, why do you drink? Well, because my father was an alcoholic. And so it's taking what has happened and attaching meaning to it. And then that too influences your life and how life shows up. And one of the things I always try to like really touch with people, because this was where I got a great breakthrough. It was like, okay, this happened in your life, but now what? How is it influencing my life? How is it impacting my life? And it's directly attached to how I tell the story. Who am I in the story? What role did I play? Am I the victim to this? Am I going to suffer for the rest of my life because of this? Or am I resilient? And so being able to change the narrative, you can't change what happened, but how you attach meaning to it directly impacts your life. So I love that you say that, because it's absolutely true.
Mm-hmm. But it's the philosophy of listening to all that, you know, because I come back to quotes constantly, right? And it gives me, the wisdom. I use it for just the story you just told. I've heard that story. I've told that story, right? And as you're saying it, I'm thinking about, the movie Forrest Gump, right? Have you seen that movie?
Of course.
Yeah. Lieutenant Dan, that was his war to die, and that was his destiny. And he got his legs blown off, and how he was just in that self-pity, and that, for Forrest saving him, because that, he took his destiny away. Right. And then how it just transitioned where he got over all of that. And then at the end of the movie, he's got, prosthetic legs and a girl on his arm, and dressed, and just thank Forrest for that life-changing, for saving him.
There's so many like hidden gems in that movie. This makes me think of one of my favorite movies, actually, of Tom Hanks, is Castaway. And although it's this simple, there's not a big cast in the movie, and it's spent mostly with him on this island,
with the soccer ball.
Yeah, but there's so many of those metaphors to life, and the ways to look at things. Even as something as simple as you never know what the tides may bring in, and that's what got him off the island. And there's all these things, and at the end, being at a crossroad, but you have more choices in your life than you realize, but it's a matter of what is your ability to just decide and move forward with that decision. And like you said, when you left the factory, your compelling why was, I'm not going back.
Right.
And I always tell people, what will move you mostly is your compelling why. Something has to be so compelling in you. And I think sometimes people think that it has to be something really grandiose, like I've got to do this thing greater than myself, and which is very admirable and it's very important. But sometimes it's saying, because I can't go back, that is going to compel me. Like I was in the casino business for a long time, and I was very successful in that business. But when I was done, and everyone's like, are you crazy? You're going to walk away from this lucrative career? I'm like, yes. And I know this is a big step that I'm taking, but I believe in the thing forward more than I believe in what I'm leaving. And sometimes when I have doubts and I'm in my own feeling, it's exactly what you said. I'm like, I cannot go back. No matter how shiny the object looks, I can't go back to it. No matter how safe it feels, can't go back. I've got to believe that I can keep going forward.
It's a quote that I love. I heard on Instagram, and it says, if you're not changing, you're choosing.
Love that.
Yeah. And I mean, you think about that, because people live in that, there's that stuck victim mode, and, they complain about it, but they don't realize they can actually do something about it.
And here's another thing. I'm going to piggyback to that. What I have learned, because there are people who I know are remarkable and they have such great potential, but like you said, they're stuck in that victim mode. And what I've learned is sometimes they're so tied to it as an identity construct, as who they are. If they don't get to tell that story, if they have to tell that story different, they don't realize it, but it's almost like they don't want to have a different narrative, a different outcome from their lives, because they're so attached to.
Yeah, it's like their comfort zone.
Yeah. And there's rewards. Sometimes we're not realizing that when we play the victim, there is a reward system attached to that we're not realizing. There are people we can tell that story for, so we can get sympathy from, and we're addicted to that. There's work that, if you're not going to be the victim, that means there's going to have to be work that you're going to have to do. That means you're going to have to solve problems and have self-awareness. And some people are like, no, I'll just stay right here. And they get that kind of that fixed mindset, unfortunately. So let's talk a little bit more about the power of influence, and what was the motivation to write this book when you decided to write it?
Well, I started this podcast a year ago and couldn't figure out what to call it. And I just want to get my information out and have a positive influence on people. And so that's where the title came from. The book came later. I thought, you know what? I need to put this into a book and collect all these thoughts and experiences that I've had. And that could be a really powerful way to influence people in a positive way. And part of the book is also helping people understand all the negative influences, because people can gain influence because they're part of a family, or they're, they make a lot of money, but maybe they didn't make it the right way. And it's not a really positive influence. I mean, we see a lot of, that going on too, but you can actually, start out by building influence just by being a good person and doing what you say you're going to do and being focused and consistent, somebody that's dependable, that, I can count on that person. That's influence, right?
Absolutely. And so for you, because you've had all this success and all of these things, and what made you want to say, okay, I'm going to do a podcast now and I'm going to write these books? What was the scratch that you needed? The itch
Well, I
that
mean,
you
I
need
was
to
kind of in
scratch?
like neutral,
Okay.
I was just living life. I didn't really, it took a lot to get me to, want to move, in a sense, to take action again and to move. I was just kind of comfortable,
Hmm.
but I knew there was more, that I had a lot more in me. And so it was someone that kind of triggered that in me and got me out of my comfort zone. And that's what, I began to, cause I was just, going through the life comfortably, really comfortable. Right. And so, that's kind of what, I shouldn't, maybe got me unstuck or got me back in action. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It was like a now what for you? I'm
Yeah.
here, I'm comfortable, but there's more. There's a now what, and actually it is something that's greater than yourself, because it's your evergreen, right? It's the thing that will precede you.
Mm.
And so a book will put a stamp on your life and your legacy and everything. What are some of the things in your life, throughout your life? I know you mentioned again personal development, but what were some other things or people where you were like, where you can remember a specific time where like, wow, that has really influenced me?
Um, I remember one statement by one of my upline, and he said, "Wouldn't it be a shame for your check to grow and you didn't?"
Wow.
And I thought that it was just little profound statements, and that's why I said I'm really into like quotes that you can really apply into your life and apply to the decisions you make.
And why was that so important for you at that time when they said that? Because there's a lot of power behind that message. Where were you at that really hit you and resonated?
Well, I think it's well, at that particular time, it was my second experience in the industry, and I had reached another level of success that I didn't think I would ever, get to, and it really wasn't meant to me, but it made so much sense to me because it was about other people because if you get yourself in the right environment and you just apply yourself, you can do really well,
Mm,
right? I mean, real leadership really appears when times are tough, right?
absolutely.
Because when everything is good, all boats rise. And so sometimes people can think that their success is coming from how good they are and not the environment that they may be taking advantage of. And so you see these flash in the pans, they'll have success in something and then they'll just crash and burn. It's the working on yourself and staying, as Napoleon Hill talked about, keep the saw sharpened, right? And so I guess there was that statement that made me realize I got to continue to grow.
Man, you just said something that really resonated with me. If you put yourself in the right rooms,
Mm-hmm.
in the right spaces, it's like if it really hit me. But you have to know who you are. Would you agree with that? You have to kind of know who you are. But you're right. If you put yourself at your fullest potential in the right space, it'll just kind of take off. It'll just do its thing.
Yeah, and I think you have to have the wisdom to recognize it and that it is a bad room or a good room, because you put yourself in the wrong room and the same is going to happen. It's just like even I talk about, one of a very important element I think for success is focus, right? But too many people are focused on the wrong thing.
Mm.
They're focused on the wrong activity. Jim Rohn, again, he talks about, most anything in life boils down to about a half a dozen things that really make a difference, that move the needle. But most people are focused on hundreds of different things, and they're the wrong things. So you really got to ask yourself, is, what you're focused on really working? Again, coming back to Jim Rohn, he talked about when he met his mentor, Mr. Shoaff, and he was at that time broke, behind on his bills, behind on his promises. Things weren't going well. And his mentor says, I think it's long enough to stay on that philosophy. You need to change what you're doing.
How do you know though? What's a good temperature check with that? Like if I feel like, and you're to your point, I've seen it, I've done it, where I think I'm on the right path, and I keep doing the same thing, and I think that I'm focused, and it doesn't. Things are kind of like falling apart. How do you know if you're in that right room? when people are so, especially these days, everyone's somebody or something,
Right.
and you could think you're in the right room all day long, and you're not. How do you know?
I mean, I think part of it must have to do with instinct, right? Maybe just a sense of knowing what's right or wrong, or yeah, but that's it. You can be completely wrong and be focused on that and believe in that. I mean, that's the other thing I learned is you can have, conflicting truths or conflicting beliefs, right? But beliefs can change. So can, so can truth. We believe something according to what we know, but when we learn something else, that information changes what we believe.
Yeah, I bring this up all the time. Years ago, I took this course. Landmark Forum was the name of the company that put on this. It was probably one of the most profound of all of the different courses I've taken throughout my life. This one left the biggest impact on me, and the biggest takeaway was you know what you know what you don't know, but you don't know what you don't know, and those are your blind spots in your life, and to conceive it, you don't know what you don't know. It's almost like the abyss. It's like space. It's like it just can go on infinitely. And in order for those blind spots to be revealed, you do have to be around people who can show you what those blind spots are. But being open and, like you said, coachable to the fact that, okay, that is a blind spot. Because I think also sometimes we're so afraid of being wrong or looking foolish that we hide behind what we know we don't know and what we know instead of really tapping in and saying, you know what, this person's telling me about this blind spot. And if I just allow that to be, and it's okay that I'm flawed here, it can actually create some exponential growth in my life.
I think that's a huge thing right there, because if you're the person that thinks you know everything, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where I mean, I know what I know, but I know there's people that know more, and I'm open to learn. And so you got to have that open mind to where, yes, you have to be focused. Yes, you have to be committed, but you can't be so focused that you can't see what else is around you. Right. You have to, pay attention to it. You may, still stay focused, but you got to consider, hey, maybe there's something to this. Right. Maybe I am, needing to do it this way. Matter of fact, from a networking standpoint, I wrote my first book was called Right or Almost Right. Okay. And the concept behind that is you see people working hard, seemingly doing everything right, but are they doing it right? Or are they doing it almost right? It's little subtleties that make a major difference in the result you experience. Right. So you can go through the motions and it looks like, hey, I'm doing the same thing that person's doing, but you're actually not. There's little subtleties that are making a difference. It could be the way you communicate with people, the instinct, that the way you respond to something, or whatever. There's all, and I remember doing this one podcast actually quite a while ago, and the thing I said back to him, he asked me about, can I teach people, what I do? And I said, I really can't teach them what I do. I can teach them what to do, but I can't really teach them what I do. Right. Because I think there's a person in every industry, there's a group of people that have phenomenal success. Right. They just know. Right. They just know exactly what to do, what to say, how to do something at the right moment. It just all really works for them. And then you got the other people that look like they're doing the same thing, but they're not having the same results.
And what do you think that is? You just think that for some, there's just anomalies and just things that are more innate in certain people than in other people? Because that is a good point too. Like, I remember when I first started posting videos online, people were like, you got to put your stuff on social media. And I was like, eh. And then I did. And then I started getting these viral videos. And then I started getting calls and people wanting me to come and speak and talk to them, talk to their group of salespeople or whatnot about how to go viral. And I said, I would be completely lying if I got on your stage and told that story. I can only, exactly what you said, I can only say, this is what I did. This is the story that I told. I know that I'm very authentic. And that, to me, is my superpower. I don't sugarcoat. I keep it real. I say what I say. But I don't know what that magic formula is for me that made that it could be timing. It could be when the algorithm is nicer. It could be a lot of different things. And so
it's your natural instinct to just, you do at the right moment, at the right thing, where I don't know if it can be taught. Maybe it can be acquired, but you're again, one of those people that that just have that sense of knowing, and you don't even know why. It's an instinct.
Right. And I think that everybody, if they understand their seed, and I've been using this analogy quite a bit lately, um, and they really truly understand. We talk about quotes. My favorite quote right now is, "Any fool can count the amount of seeds are in one apple, but only God can count the amount of apples are in one seed."
Hmm.
And so when you know that you are the potential of that seed, if I know I'm an apple seed, my potential at its greatest level is to be an orchard. That one seed can become an orchard, right? But I have to know that I am an apple seed first, right? And if I do the things because I'm looking at an oak tree and a forest of oak trees, and I'm trying to do that, I could try to do everything that they're doing and it still won't provide me my forest. And I think it always goes back to innately, naturally, what is your essence? What is your seed? Because when you get into flow with that, then you will see whatever manifestation you're supposed to have, because then you'll know what to do and how to nurture it, how to be influenced by it, right? How to put it in the right soil, how to get your mind right for it. And I think sometimes that's what the piece that people are missing. It's like, well, who are you? Do you
Right.
want to be them, or do you want to be the greatest version of self? Because that we can do, because you are so unique that only you can be the greatest version of self. If
And
you,
I think that
yeah,
same motion is looking at all the, because sometimes we can make decisions that we may know aren't the thing to do, but we do it for short term, success or whatever. I think if you really try to stay in tune to that, where in because it could lead you down a path you don't want to go down.
hmm
If you really try to do what's right all the time, right, even when it's not easy or comfortable. And it's going to come back and pay dividends. It might be a slower way to go sometimes, but it's going to get you there. Somebody else might excel because they took a shortcut that wasn't necessarily right, but you'll end up passing them if you stay focused and stay true to yourself.
yeah, it's like the tortoise and the hare story, right?
Exactly.
Again, with me having talked to many successful people, one of the things that they all have said to me is, we're successful because we have the ability to delay gratification.
Mm.
And people who are in a rush to get to something, they fall back. So you'll get momentum and you'll fall back, but it's because they don't have the patience for the farm to grow, for the crops to harvest. And so that's like, it's one of the things I always remember when I feel like I'm in a rush to get somewhere. And it's like the fastest way to get there is slowly. And so, and
Yeah,
I have to remind myself.
I think right now too that we live in a TikTok world. I mean, nobody has any patience for anything.
Right.
And the youth today want that. They want to have this lifestyle. They want to have the big life immediately, and they don't know, all the steps and the little things. People that went through to be where they are today. I mean, I always say, every master was once a disaster, right? I mean, it's that self-improvement and being open
Right.
to learn and not think you know everything.
So for you at this stage in your life, what are the things that you want to do moving forward to influence people in a powerful way?
Well, I mean, I think just the people I'm around or the people that want to learn from me, to try to give them really good advice or good impact, good input that can actually help them grow for them. And it's versus, I think sometimes we can fall into something that to benefit us versus benefit them. Right.
Mm.
And so when they look back, I mean, probably one of the things I'm most proud of over my 37-year career in this is I got no one saying anything bad about me.
Mm.
Right. If you
That's
Google me, there's
powerful.
nobody bashing me. And so because I truly try to, because I got to live with myself.
It's character and
Yeah,
integrity.
character is a huge deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And that in and of itself is influential and powerful. When you can be in company of people who are great character, that's a big thing for me. Even when I was working in the casino business and there were contracts and accounts that I could get, I was a headhunter for the casino, chasing after the big $1 million players. And there were certain players that their character was so ugly,
Yeah.
is the only word I could use, that I didn't care how big of a bankroll they were bringing. I did not want to work with that person. And I was very integral about my work. So like you said, I felt I could walk away. I used to always say, I can walk away from anything, but I won't walk away from my integrity. So even if this job seems seedy to some people or people are like this, I am very integral about my work. If I see that somebody has a problem, I'm not going to market them and try to get them to come in. And I'm going to trust that if I'm integral and have good character, the customers will come that need to come. And the ones that I have boundaries with, so be it, I'll be fine. And it always seemed to work itself out because of that, you know? And I could lay my head down at night and felt just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wonder about those people that have that character like you were describing, you know, in some of those people,
Mm-hmm.
you know, what they might think at night, or, you know, if they're really happy or if they're just so into themselves, they're oblivious to what they do to others.
I think, in my personal opinion, is they're very unhappy people. I remember years ago, I used to work as an EMT here in town. So I've had a lot of different careers. But I did it for 10 years. And I remember while I was doing that job, I was also working in the casino. So I was building up my career. And so I had to do both jobs. I was a single mom. Anyhow, I would work like a 12-hour shift on the ambulance, and then I'd go in the casino and work 8 hours. So there were days when I was
Wow.
working 20 hours. And I'll never forget, I ran this call in a very poor neighborhood, and there was an old elderly gentleman who was having a massive heart attack. And the entire neighborhood, it felt like, was there to concerned. Everyone bound. I mean, they were following us in the ambulance. It was just an amazing how everybody just loved this man, and they had seemingly nothing, right? I mean, we're talking a very impoverished area. Later on that evening, I get a call in a very wealthy neighborhood, and we're talking estate homes and that kind of thing. And there was an elderly man around the same age who was also having a massive heart attack. And I remember he was sitting alone in his foyer. They had like this banister upstairs in the house, and the family member was looking down. I was like, how long is this going to take? And do we need to? And this and this and that. And we transport him alone. And then later that night, I go into the casino, and I've got this big millionaire person complaining. And it was one of those moments in my life where I said, the most richest experience I had today was in that poor neighborhood where that old man was critically ill, and he had so much love around him. And that was one of those moments when I realized I need a life that's fulfilling, not one that's necessarily wealthy. I mean, I want to have riches in my life, but I would rather have that joy and knowing that I'm loved than to see someone with all this opulence and be completely miserable or alone, you know? And it was very humbling for me to experience that all in one day. You know?
Yeah, it's a powerful story.
Yeah.
And because, you know, you can have money and still be loved, right? You know,
Of course.
it's how did you do it, or who did you help or walk over along the way? You know,
Absolutely.
So but that's probably what can lead to that loneliness or that life by yourself with all the money around you.
But it goes
But
back, circling
unfulfilled.
back to what you said earlier, building around your character and who you are. Because I think great people have money and not so great people have money. And Tony Robbins says this, all money does is embellish who you already are.
Yep.
So if you're a good person, you'll be greater. If you're a giver, you'll give more. If you're not a nice person, you have more money to be not as nice. And so, because there's always a misconception. Sometimes people think that all people with money are bad or whatever, but that's negative connotation. That's negative influence that stops them from their own growth sometimes. That could be a whole other podcast. Yeah, but I love this conversation of influence. I think that it's so much more powerful than people think, and it can be done on the smallest of scales. And I'm going to share this story really quick, and then I want to close with you. I'm sharing some other things, but you know, when I was a little girl, I lived in a impoverished neighborhood. The neighborhood was called Crack Alley, and it was drug infested and everything. And there was a murder in the neighborhood, and all of our neighbors were outside, being nosy about what happened. And there was a fire truck that parked alongside my building. And we used to see these fire trucks come in and out, and ambulance because of the craziness in the neighborhood. But I had never seen the fire truck so close. And so while everyone's looking at what the crime, I'm over there at this fire truck, and I'm checking, and all of a sudden I hear someone yell, "Hey." And I look, and it's a fireman, and he's yelling at me. And he goes, "What are you looking at?" And he goes, "Are you looking at my fire truck?" And I kind of nodded my head. I'm little, I'm like 10, 11 years old. And he says, "Don't look at my fire truck." And I put my head down, I'm getting ready to walk away. And he goes, "Get on it." And he picked me up and he put me on the fire truck. And he started showing me the apparatus and all the cool stuff. And then he asked me, "What do you want to do when you get older? Do you want to be a firefighter?" I didn't even know that a little girl in my neighborhood, a girl on top of that, had even an opportunity. And I said, "Me?" And he said, "Little girl, you can be anything you want."
Wow.
That was a seed he planted in me. I, to this day, will never forget the influence, the impact he left in my life. That's what made me go and become a paramedic and work on the ambulance and work in healthcare for so long, because he told me I could. And I don't think that people realize that just that man doesn't even realize the impact of his influence on my life. And I think that I say the story because I really wish that people understood you don't have to be this big name or this big person or be a multimillionaire or anything like that to still be powerful in your influence. You can touch people's lives every day with the things you do and say for them. So thank you. Let me share that story. How would you like to close this, as far as what would be your message to people out there that you want to leave them with when it comes to the power of influence?
Well, I think, it doesn't matter where you are in life, right? You can change it, right? If you're going through a bad time, it never lasts. There'll be better times to come, but the same is true if you're going through really good times. That'll change too. And so, being a good person and just understanding, that you're always influencing people, just like that fireman influenced you, but you're being influenced every single day, right? And the people you hang around with have a big impact. And I think the other thing, like I mentioned it earlier about our self-talk, and that's what the personal development or getting around the right people can interrupt that self-talk and being conscious of it, right? And I love this story, and it was from Earl Nightingale, and he said, "Your mind is like a farmer's land," and he says, just like the farmer's land, it doesn't care what you plant. You can take and dig 2 little holes and put corn in one and nightshade in another, nightshade being a deadly poison, and you water and take care of it. It'll grow the nightshade, the deadly poison, as easy as it'll grow the corn. It's all in what are you watering, right? And, our another part of that is because our subconscious mind doesn't know right from wrong, good from bad, positive from negative. It only knows what our conscious mind feeds it, right? And it goes to work on it. And so if you're feeding it the wrong information, it's going to work on the wrong stuff. And so if you're living in that pity or that self-doubt or, nothing ever good can happen to me, nothing probably will. But if you can change that narrative, and the only way I know how to do that is you have to get around the right information. You have to pour it in.
Right. I love that. What you focus on grows. That's that Nightingale. That's was that The Greatest Secret in the World?
Strangest Secret.
The Strangest Secret in the World. I had a gentleman give me that CD. It was a CD at the time when I was 19 years old.
I still listen to it today. It's a phenomenal message in that.
It's powerful, and you're powerful. And I appreciate you coming here and gracing us with your presence and sharing your story. I definitely would love to pick your brain more.
Yeah, me as well. I would love to hear more about your story.
Yeah, likewise. Well, we'll definitely make arrangements for that. So tell everybody where they can find you and how they can get a copy of your book. And I will be leaving, I'm sorry, real quick. I will be leaving links as well, but let's hear from you as well.
Yeah, so, I've got a YouTube channel. It's under my name. My Instagram is under my name, just John Aremza, or the book's on Amazon. And there's an audiobook on Spotify.
Awesome.
So everything is just under, if you Google John Aremza, I should pop up.
Pop up with all positive things. Yeah. Well, thank you again for your time and for your story. And I appreciate having you here. You can come back anytime.
Thank you. This was really great.
Yeah, likewise.
I enjoyed it.
Glad you're here. So thank you so much for watching another episode of the Lorraine Lindsay podcast. Remember, if you've watched this full episode, do not forget to hit the like and the subscription button. We are steadily growing, and it's because you out there who are watching. I appreciate it so much. Until next time, ciao.